And gentlemen, we are live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's the Full 40 with Chris and Rob, part of the Nova Insider Network, joined by Chris Notaro from Villanova Tip Time, back for the kind of third day in a row, but really the second day in a row.
Third day we're trying at least.
Third day we tried.
Yeah.
Second day we executed. We think.
That's true.
We hope this sounds okay.
Just like Villanova, actually.
That's exactly right.
Interesting parallel. So maybe this is going to be indicative of how the game's going to go.
I like that.
Let's hope it goes smoothly then.
I like where your head's at, Rob. I like where your head's at.
And we are also coming to you live from our third different location in 3 days.
Yes.
Keep you on your toes.
Keeping us on our toes, frankly.
True.
If it hasn't been immediately obvious to everybody, we are amateur hour on our audio video knowledge. So we're just going live. We're doing it live.
Do it live. Fuck.
So
amazing.
So much to cover and so little time. If it's not clear to all of you watching, my voice is shot. And because last night was outrageous in the Garden.
Crazy.
So I think we start right there. Last night in the Garden, the 9:30 prime time tip-off, UConn and Villanova Friday night. Everyone wants to see who Providence is going to draw, and then everyone wants to see Villanova and UConn go at it on Friday night. And guys, it delivered. It was incredible in the Garden. The game was played at such a high level. Coaches making adjustments, defensive switches, changes, getting people to make uncharacteristic mistakes. The guys who got left open making important shots. It just featured everything that you'd love to see in a classic conference college basketball tournament matchup.
Absolutely. And I will say, before we even got to the game, we absolutely proved the point of this was the game and this was the matchup everybody wanted to see. We were in the hotel room at the Intercontinental waiting out ticket prices, trying to see if they would drop. We kept saying, oh, they'll drop. Well, they never dropped. We just kind of bit the bullet at a certain point. And I'm definitely glad we did, because especially after the end of the Providence Creighton game, this was to me equivalent to the 1980 Miracle on Ice. This was the USA versus the USSR. The big game is in the semifinals. It's not the finals. This is what the people wanted to see, and it absolutely delivered last night. I feel privileged to have been there with you, Chris. It was a blast.
It was awesome. And Notaro, I got to ask you, you watched the game at home. I'm curious about how the Fox broadcast was.
It was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't Gus and Raft. It was Gus and Jim. So, I think in my heart of hearts, I definitely would have preferred Gus and Raft. That's no disrespect to Jim. I'm a fan of his as well. But that Gus Raft matchup is kind of magic. I think the Fox broadcast is always good. I find myself just appreciating the Fox broadcast in general as we have to suffer through the CBS Sports Network a couple times a season, and they don't even do replays on CBS Sports Network. So I find that the Fox crew does a really good job showing you every possible replay, which I appreciate more than the narration. But with
how much did Fox pay you to say that?
No, I get what he's saying here. The in-game with their top-level announcers has improved quite a bit.
Top-level announcers,
and behind the scenes, I waited out ticket prices with Chris and Rob, and then pulled the ripcord at the last second and headed to the Long Island Railroad and literally walked into my mother's house on Long Island by the skin of my teeth and turned the game on, and it was boom, tip off. So I didn't really catch much of the programming outside of that.
Oh man, it was just electric in there. And man, there's so many plays and things to talk about, but I want to go right into the awards.
We got to start there.
We got to start with
Shaq, and you got to start with Shaq Fit.
We got to start with the Shaq Fit man play of the week, of the game, maybe of the season. I don't know.
Has to be of the season, right?
Yeah.
As of right now, it is the Shaq Fit Man play of the season, bar none.
I mean, it has to be, right? Because Shaq Fit himself recorded a video and said that was correct. Like Chris and Rob were correct in calling that the Shaq Fit Man play of the week.
Yes.
But it
Recording
was
in progress.
But it was incredible. The Brandon Slater block. There was a squirm to try and get a. What am I trying to say? What's the right word? Whatever. The ball was all over the map. It was a loose ball. Ball's getting kicked around all over the place. Guys diving all over the floor. Ball squeaks out to Tyrese Martin, who is having a great game himself. He goes up for the big dunk, and Brandon Slater meets him right there, pins the ball on the backboard. We get the rebound, an absolutely critical moment in that game. And my goodness, just what an incredible play at an incredible moment. And it was everything that the Shaq Fit Man play of the week is intended to be.
Absolutely is. I would say the only thing that would have made it better is if we had a quick follow and finish on the other end. But regardless, it stands. Huge play. Absolutely. Like that could have been a big momentum swing to them, but it stopped it. Again, we didn't capitalize quite as much, but hat tip to Mr. Slater. I know I've been critical throughout the year. He's absolutely hitting his stride right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah. He's incredible. He's been incredible of late. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a bit. I want to also talk about the alpha dog of the game.
Arf.
And that's going to Jermaine Samuels. I don't think there could be any debate about that one either.
No, absolutely not. And I'd say you look at his stat line, the stat line stands out, right? 21 and 12 with one turnover. Guess how many fouls he had?
Did he have no fouls? No, he had no fouls.
He had no fouls, primarily playing the 5, where he's giving up like 3-4 inches and 50 pounds against Sonogo, and somehow was able to play absolutely stellar defense. And it was a great team effort on Sonogo for sure, who finished only 6 of 15 from the field. So offensively, defensively, Samuels got it done, hit some big shots early, hit some big shots late. The combination of Slater and Samuels being able to step up, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot more, when UConn was able to shut down Colin and Justin for the most part, is just absolutely critical for this team. And once again, the timing couldn't be better for us. So huge for Jermanuary coming into Jamarchuary. We're really stretching here on the nicknames. Okay, let's Jermaine.
He was electric last night. And clearly the game plan, and Hurley said as much, was that they weren't going to let Moore and Gillespie beat them. Dixon, it was obvious if you were in the Garden. It was probably obvious if you weren't in the Garden that Dixon didn't have his best performance. He's coming off of food poisoning. We talked about it. We were questioning who could have food poisoned him. There was a conspiracy theory out there, many conspiracy theories out there, but we put those all to bed, just regular food poisoning. And but he could tell that he was just out of it. Although I have to give a couple points of credit there. The 3 he made to send us up 8 kind of late in that game was absolutely a critical moment in that game. And like, I want to go back to, and sorry, I kind of digressed on Dixon. I want to go back to Samuels, because Samuels, if the Slater block doesn't happen, Samuels probably has Shaq Fit Man plays. He had 2 of them with the offensive board that he got late in the game and the run out dunk that he had, that man jam. He was just absolutely everywhere, hitting threes. Shot all of a sudden looks better, not flat anymore. We've joked on this podcast that Jermaine has had 7,000 different shooting motions in the course of this season alone. But everything seems to be coming together right now for Jermaine.
It was unbelievable to see him almost take the bait of the bulletin board fodder of Danny Hurley and UConn saying, we're going to make Samuels and Slater beat us. And then that's exactly what those guys did, especially with Jermaine Samuels dealing with back spasms, dropping 21 points and 12 boards. That is a heroic performance, especially when you've been basically challenged by the opponent to beat them, and then you come out injured, less than 100%, and that you actually do that. That's unbelievable. And even if Jermaine hasn't had, the best season of his Villanova career or the season that anybody might have hoped, he's peaking at the absolute right time, and he's taking over that super senior leader role, and it has never been on display more evidently as it was last night.
I need those back spasms right now. I mean, that's
right.
Is that what back spasms give you? That's terrific. I need some of those.
Oh man. And then I just thought that we got great play out of everybody yesterday.
I can't agree more. You look at the score sheet, right? We basically ran 6 guys for the most part. Longino played 10 minutes. I mostly loved the 10 minutes that he gave us. He took 3 shots. He made 2 of them. I said this to you, Chris, during the game. He is not afraid to shoot the ball.
No.
And the shot is, in contrast to Jermaine, his shot is really pretty looking. Mm-hmm. And he is going to make some big shots for us in the future. Like, I'm pretty sure he's just like, yeah, if it comes down to Final Four and I have the last shot, I don't think he'll pass it up without a doubt. So that was pretty cool. And he filled in pretty well. Caleb a little quieter today yesterday, but it happens.
Caleb was quieter, but he didn't need to be much different. And then who was on? It was Jermaine who was on the line. I was thinking about this because the game was like a repeat of the game up at the XL Center. We were up like 4 or 5 or 3, 4 or 5, 3. It was with like 40 seconds left, 50 seconds left, and we get sent to the line to shoot a 1-and-1, and we don't miss the front end. And like to me, I was like, yes, Caleb. It was Caleb again.
Yeah, it was Caleb, and it was Caleb redemption because it was the exact same situation where he missed the 1-and-1, which led to
XL Center.
a horrible series of events that ended up losing the game, and a lot of people were pinning that on Caleb. And last night he walked up cool as a cucumber and banged him.
And it was crazy because also towards the end of that game, there was a play where Slater inbounded the ball to Moore in the corner. Moore quickly thought through it, got it back out to Slater, and then we got a feed up to Gillespie that worked like 8 seconds off the clock in a really critical moment down the stretch there too. That exact same play was the trap at the XL Center in Hartford just a few weeks ago. So it was kind of wild to kind of see it all play out again and to get like a different version of the simulation, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was, and then on this time we came out on top. So, I mean, look,
and the difference was Dan Hurley was actually on the sideline for the losing effort for them. So I don't know, make of that what you will.
I have to say, someone tweeted at me, Dan Hurley still hasn't beaten Villanova yet. And I lost it.
So
such a good tweet.
Chris Lane of VU Hoops fame, he had tweeted something back around the time, I think the night that we lost to UConn, basically saying, or maybe the day after, basically saying like, why is everybody anointing UConn like the new it girl in the Big East? Essentially, the track record like shows that this was an anomaly. And he retweeted that last spot on. It was like, what, like nothing has changed here. Nothing changed from that game. And Villanova put that on display last night in a big way.
But I will say kudos to Hurley over the past, I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that the first game this season wasn't quite as close, but the past 2, if these are any indication of how this series is going to play out in the future, I'm all for it. Having another competitive rival where I think there's a little bit of kind of mutual dislike, but also a little bit of mutual respect. Really cool. I can get pretty jacked up for these games. So sign me up for more 3-point, 2-point games.
Totally.
So before we move on to dancing on Providence's grave a little bit, we probably should call out Colin Gillespie, who didn't necessarily light it up from the points perspective, but he did have 10 assists, which stands out to me as pretty outstanding.
Huge.
Especially considering some of them were like dimes, like absolute dimes.
Oh man, the feed from behind the back to Samuels late in that game. You know what I'm talking about? Down low.
Oh yeah.
Where he fed Samuels, and Samuels got that. It was a layup or something. It was. I mean.
Oh, did Colin also do the one with the play clock, the shot clock winding down, underhand to Dixon, and then Dixon just like whoop, like as quickly as he could on the.
I think it was Samuels who did that.
Oh, maybe it was Samuels.
Yeah, it was Samuels who did that. But yes, you're right. That Colin was the one who made that feed.
Yeah.
So look, Colin, you'd say, looking at the stat line, you'd say, oh, he had 5 points. Is he a candidate for the Pass the Effing Ball Award of the week? No, because he passed the ball.
Absolutely.
He said, these guys are blanketing me, and I'm going to feed it to everyone else and make them beat you.
That's exactly right. The decision-making was so spot on. And it's a huge testament to him to realize when the opponent has locked him down, has taken away his primary shooting option, and his role becomes a distributor. Again, 10 assists.
Talking about Villanova Creighton tonight, but I know last night we were all, calling for the Colin Gillespie signature Big East tournament game last night. I don't know that we quite got it in the way that we expected, but it also means we're kind of due tonight for it. So
we are due tonight. We are due for him to put the stamp on the tournament, and I think tonight's the night. But I want to get back to one thing. We have to take a little bit of a victory lap here. Yesterday on yesterday's preview podcast, we said this game, yeah, you got Sanogo down low. Yeah, you got the guards. There's a little bit of a cancellation factor there. This game comes down to what happens on the wings. They got a big punch from Tyrese Martin, who was incredible with 19 of his own. We got punches from Brandon Slater and Jermaine Samuels combined, and that was enough to get the job done. I said the game was going to be one on the wings, and it was.
Yeah, I also nailed a prediction. I said Dixon was going to have a huge game. Just really nailed that.
We said Dixon was going to play.
All right, should we move along?
Yeah. So what happened last night for Providence? What happened?
Was there a game? I think Providence forfeited actually. So terrible.
As I tweeted last night, Providence pulled the 2016 Oklahoma in a semifinal playbook. They forgot for a long stretch of game. Creighton went on a 31-2 run. 31-2. What happened? What are you doing? Did you forget? It's crazy.
They didn't play the full 40. They played the full 0. They literally didn't show up. I don't know what, 12 or 14 or something. And we're like, oh yeah, it'll turn around. It just got worse.
No, they had 27 points at the end of the first half, and it felt like they had 27 points until 5 Jekyll and Hyde team that I can remember. And on top of being a Jekyll and Hyde team, game to game, they're also Jekyll and Hyde within the same game themselves. They just go on big runs and then all of a sudden look anemic. And it's kind of crazy how up and down Creighton can be. But you got to tip your cap, because everyone coming into this tournament was all chalk. Providence, all the Midwest teams can go and go out west and go home early and wait for their NCAA tournament draw. And Creighton basically came in there and shut everybody up and said, no, I don't know what else you can say, because here's a team. They had to reinvent themselves totally. They lost almost all their players from last year's Sweet 16 run. And here they are. They were talked about as a bubble team as recently as 2-3 weeks ago. This ain't a bubble team.
Well, because they did have a swoon.
They did have a little bit of a swoon at the end of January, but it wasn't that bad. They've won they've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They've won 9 of 11 down the stretch. So they've just been absolutely ripping through teams left and right. And they got blown out at Providence a couple of weeks ago, and they paid them back in kind. But the other thing you have to give them credit for is they lose Ryan Nembhard, the Big East Freshman of the Year, and then go and beat Connecticut, Marquette, and Providence in their last 4 games, with one loss coming to Seton Hall by 5 points. And how can you give them anything but there's a ton of credit?
I mean, if you look at the stats from last night, you've got Alex O'Connell, who went absolutely nuts for Creighton. He had 4 of 6 threes, 18 total points. You had Creighton shoot 39% from 3, which isn't paralyzing, but Providence shot 3 of 24 for a whopping 12.5%. And I don't think that's the difference. When you lose by 27, it's more than one thing. But that, I think, jumps out from the stat sheet more than anything. Overall field goal percentage was 52% to 30% in favor of Creighton. And that's pretty much the story right there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, what else can you say?
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about Creighton. I don't feel like we need to talk too much more about Providence. They're going to get their seed. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's talk about Creighton in this matchup here tonight
Oh
in the
boy.
Big East
Oh
Championship.
boy. I
Oh
don't-
boy.
Yeah. Oh boy.
So Creighton has actually been the best defensive team in the conference. And I don't think that's not something that you typically associate with Creighton, actually, over the years. You've typically associated them with a good offensive team that can let teams kind of score on them as well. But if they're going to beat you, they're going to overwhelm you offensively because Dermot's an incredible offensive mind and coach and finds ways to get guys open, knows kind of how to play with the tempo game. They're always kind of middle of the road in tempo because they know how to speed things up if they feel like they have an opportunity to attack, but they also know how to play in the half court. We've talked about how McDermott's a great coach, but like, I think that this team is defensive focused is a pretty good testament to their squad. They are ranked 21st in Ken Palm adjusted defensive efficiency. Yeah, anything top 30 is excellent. And then on offense, they're actually 109, but they've shown the ability sometimes to get really hot like they did yesterday against Providence.
And it'll be another, I think, key to the game tonight, whether or not they have that strong production out of the guard role.
So these two teams played very different games against one another with wildly different outcomes during the season. But we haven't played Creighton in 2 months.
Because we almost played them like back to back, right?
Yeah, we basically played them. We played them on the 17th of December and then played them on January 5th. So it's literally been 2 months and a week since we've those two games versus a team that beat us by 20 just a couple weeks earlier.
Honestly, I don't even remember. It was literally 2 months ago. I have no idea what happened in losses. We hadn't really beaten anybody. And I think we were saying I remember I called the first loss was one of my predictions. And I saw it as more of like a momentum type thing. The team in my mind kind of just wasn't quite clicking. At that point, we were still trying to figure out roles and different things like that. I think we're still dealing with a little bit of injuries as well. The difference between those two games, was basically 2 weeks, give or take. Granted, there was a holiday break in there that you account for. But if I think about the difference between then and now, I'm comparing a Nova team. Obviously, I'm comparing a Creighton team that's very different because of the reasons that we just described. But I'm also comparing a Nova team that is also very different. The evolution of our team we've discussed at length on this podcast. So Creighton, I think, is in for a rude awakening when they show up at the Garden tonight, because they're looking at a totally different, totally loaded Nova team that didn't even exist a month ago, let alone 2 months ago when we played Creighton the second time around.
Yeah, and I think when you look back to that Creighton loss, we lost by 20 at Creighton. It was the first game of the Big East. It was the Friday night after we had gotten the doors blown off of us in Waco on the Sunday prior. Yeah. Had to turn around, probably went back to Nova for a couple days, and then probably flew back out to Omaha. That game was actually closer than I think a lot of people remember. Nova played like crap that game, but they were, I think, with like about 8 minutes left in the game, they had cut the deficit to like 1 or 2 points. And then they did that thing that they've done a couple times this year on us, where then they just like stopped scoring from there out, and they lost by 20. So that game was a little bit, even though we played really poorly, that game was a lot closer than the score indicates when you just look at the box score. And then we absolutely blew the doors off them at the Pavilion a couple weeks later, a week and a half later. So that, plus the fact that, this game is a little bit more home turf for Nova than it is for Creighton, I think tips the scales way in our favor. Plus the fact that we're Villanova and they're Creighton tips the scales way in our favor. The only thing I will say, I don't want to breathe a ton of life into it, is this Creighton team having lost the point guard, everybody talking about what a bang-up job Greg McDermott is doing with this team. They do feel a little bit like Team of Destiny-ish for the Big East tournament. So that is like the only thing I'm really afraid of here. Otherwise, I just have that feeling like Nova's supposed to get it done tonight. You know what I mean?
They have that vibe about them, that Destiny vibe. I will agree. It does strike me a little bit in that way of like, man, They just feel like they're coming to upset all the plans in the Garden, spoil everything.
Everybody counted them out. Nobody was talking about them as a possibility of getting by.
Even Marquette.
A lot of people had them losing even to Marquette, let alone getting past Providence in the semis. And so the fact that they were able to just sort of do that pretty handily, they had a harder time with Marquette than they did with Providence, that's for sure. It's got that vibe to it. That said, Nova's got a real swagger to them, got a real drip. I think the only complaint is on the rotation, just like we've had the complaint all year. But coach has already shown he's sticking with that. He's not changing. Last night you only had 7 guys even get into the game. You didn't see any Brian Anton. You didn't see any Chris Archer-Diacono. It just that is what it is at this point. But you feel like Nova's going to have to take care of business tonight.
So I guess we get into the predictions, right?
I think we have to, yeah. What kind of game are we going to see?
So the last 2 games from Villanova have been absolute rock fights by the end of it. And so just low scoring, low possession, etc. Creighton isn't the type that's going to speed us up too much, but they tend to speed us up a little bit more than like a UConn would. Like last night's game was 57 possessions, which is actually the low water mark on the season. But regardless, what was I going to say? The low water mark on the season in terms of possessions was yesterday. I think this game plays a little bit more up tempo than yesterday's game. I think guys get out a little bit more. I think the guards dictate this game a little bit more than the wings did yesterday. Obviously, defensively, we need to be strong, but the guards are really critical and important in this game. I think this is a Colin Gillespie game. I think Villanova does get this done. I think this game is played close. First game was a blowout in Creighton's favor. Second game was a blowout in Villanova's favor. I think this game is going to come down the middle. I'm predicting a score in the 70s. And I'm thinking something like 76-70 Villanova at the end of the game with Colin Gillespie making a critical play down the stretch after having a good game himself, then a couple fouls and free throws to kind of spread the lead out to about 5 or 6 points.
I think the thing I want to call out is like Caleb Daniels has completely carried our guards from a scoring perspective through the Big East tournament so far. Justin Moore has played probably his, call it, most sluggish back-to-back games we've seen from him in a while. And Colin Gillespie seems like he's poised for the breakout on the big stage. If you add all that up to what I hope we're going to see tonight, that ends in a really good place for Villanova fans. You're not going to see back-to-back-to-back nights of Justin Moore being as cold as he was last night. And even a little bit to a degree against St. John's. He hit some big shots down the stretch after we started the rally against St. John's, but still was not, was I would say a below average night for him overall. Yesterday was definitely a below average night for him. So I think he's going to have a big bounce back game, and I totally agree. I think we're all in agreement that the stage is set for Colin Gillespie to go get it. If we can get a performance like we've gotten, even close to what we've gotten out of Caleb Daniels lately, that 3-headed monster, I think, is just going to absolutely crush it tonight. The other thing to point out, Creighton does have the size advantage, but we've done well against that both times we've played them, well enough, I should say. It kind of came back to bite us a little bit on their offensive rebounding in the first matchup, but we did really well the second time we played them. So I think Dixon and Samuels and Slater are going to be able to scrap enough to get the job done and not get blown out on the boards. And the 3-headed guard monster is gonna rock us to the W tonight.
Fair enough. Yeah, size at this point doesn't scare me. We've played enough big teams, and the size factor has never been the single or the primary reason that we've lost the game. So I hear you on that one. We've been able to address that against Creighton in the past. I like Chris's prediction of 6. Just to mix it up, I'll say it's a 4-point game. Just ends up, one basket tighter. But I think this one goes back to Colin, and Colin is our leader. I don't know, probably picking up some tournament MVP too, just for kicks as well.
You would have to have a really big game to get the MOP. I think Slater or Samuels is more slated to get the MLP.
I'm expecting a big game, and I feel like there's just going to be some nice little narrative of like, oh, he's the Big East Player of the Year too. We're going to throw that into his trophy captain as well.
Where you going with Vegas, Chris? Where do you got Vegas going?
Yeah, the fine people in Las Vegas and Macau have us at Villanova -7 for this game. So
yeah, that's where Ken Pom has it too.
So, Chris, I'm assuming you were looking at Ken Pom, but your 6 prediction is right around what the gambling folks are saying it's going to be. You know, I think all of us are pretty agreed. Like, we don't really ever bet on Villanova games because it's just already stressful enough for us as it is. As a little bit of a hobbyist on the gambling side myself, this I would say objectively is a stay away line. I wouldn't, even if I wasn't a Villanova diehard, I probably wouldn't be touching that line because it's I think it like any of the possible outcomes are all in play here. The Villanova blowout, the Villanova tight game, or Creighton outright. So I hate that line. I don't think there's much to discuss there.
No. All right. Well, we got the predictions in. So we think that we're going to hoist the trophy and cut down the nets today. I think that would be a wonderful thing to have happen. And I would like that very much. But let's move on to seeding in the NCAA tournament, because the conversation only got ratcheted up after the victory over UConn last night about how are we going to get, what's going to happen? Are we going to get the 2 seed? Are we going to get the 3 seed? What do we want? Do we want the 3 seed in the East or a 2 seed? And we talked about this a lot on yesterday's podcast. I still want to bring up 2 points that I'm very strong on in that there is no guarantee that even if we're the 3 seed, that we're the 3 seed in the East. The rationale why that's more likely is because they're trying to protect the 1 seed, so they wouldn't give you the best. They wouldn't put a 2 seed that's going to be in their home region. That's why people were saying, oh, the 3 seed in the East gives us a better opportunity to be in the East. Fine. But I was always of the impression that go out, win your games, get the best seed you possibly can, and you deal with the consequences of where you go. The first 2 games are going to be nearby because we're going to be a protected seed at this point. 3 is the absolute floor, and I think 2 is probably even more likely at this point. So you have this protected seed that's going to send us to Pittsburgh or Buffalo, but most likely Pittsburgh for the first 2 games. So either way, we're going to be East Coast for the first 2 games. And so then
I think you mean Appalachia.
Sorry. You were right to call that out. You were right to call it out. That's right.
The Poconos?
Rob is from Appalachia. He's from the capital of Appalachia, Pittsburgh. So anyway, just clarify. That's an important clarification, and I appreciate.
But Rob, that must be a emotional roller coaster for you because you're not. I believe you boys are headed to Vegas next weekend, so you would not be able to go home for these Rob Dormish home games of sorts, unfortunately.
That is true. We've known about the Vegas trip for a very long time, and I was on the phone with my dad a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Nova might be in Pittsburgh. I'll come home." And then I made that offer and got off the phone. It's like, "Nope, I'll be in Vegas." Just kidding. So
it's a good consolation, my friend. It's a good consolation.
Vegas versus home with my dad. No offense, Dad, but
Vegas for watching the entire tournament is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the point at hand. You get your first 2 games and then you go play wherever the hell you go play. And that's my attitude. I get not wanting to go all the way out west, and I'd like to avoid that. I think we still do avoid going all the way out west because there's still plenty of people you can put out there. That being said, I saw a couple brackets come out today, most notably Lucas Harkins at Hardwired Sports with Heat Check CBB, who's on our podcast and is the 2nd ranked bracketologist in the country, put us as the 2 seed in the East Regional. And all of a sudden that enters the fold as a potential possibility.
Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it? My attitude is I like that. I would very much like to be the 2 seed in the East. Sounds like the best of both worlds, because as we talked about on yesterday's podcast, there is a clear dividing line between the 6 seeds and the 7 seeds. Clear dividing line between how strong those teams are. And you get the 2 seed and you get to be in the East, forget it. That's incredible.
I mean,
That would be
yeah, I can't beat that.
yeah.
The other thing
Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to win 4 games to go to New Orleans. I like that.
and I know we probably don't want to digress onto what's going on around yet, but I will say Tennessee is up by 11 on Kentucky at halftime in the SEC semifinal. So that would be absolutely huge for us if Tennessee wins that game and gives Kentucky the blow, and huge for our chances of getting that 2 in the East.
But does it move Tennessee ahead of us?
I don't
know.
think
I don't know.
so.
We beat Tennessee.
Yeah, we beat the
It's weird.
doors off them too.
Tennessee.
Head to head is like a notoriously like not judged thing by the committee though.
Especially if it's early in the season, so they're not going to put a ton of weight into that. But I don't know, it'd be tough for Tennessee.
I'm just saying it helps us too, right? So Tennessee moves up, but then moving up helps us a little bit, right? So
It should.
I trust. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the 2 in the East becomes the apple in all of our eye, right? If that's in play. I don't think a 1 seed is really in play. No matter what happens tonight, no matter what happens with the other conference tournaments, I think our ceiling, as we discussed last night, I think our ceiling is still pretty locked in at 2.
The ceiling is the 2 and the floor is the 3. And it's win or lose tonight. I think we're on the literal fence.
That's what I was going to say.
If we lose tonight, we're a 3. If we win tonight, we're a 2. Could I see us losing tonight and getting a 2? Yeah, I guess I could see that. I don't see us winning tonight.
I think we would need help. I think it's possible, but I think we would need a lot of help. I agree. I think we control our own destiny tonight between a 2 and a 3, I think.
Yeah, I think that's on the line. I really do believe that. Because Creighton is one of those teams where their resume and they're not I don't believe they're a neutral site quad 1 team. Quad 1 team. Let's see. Let me just find them.
We're also going to be rooting for Virginia Tech, who made their first ACC tournament championship game. They're playing Duke. We're definitely going to be rooting for them.
Yep. Creighton just to follow up on that, Creighton is number 55 in the net, which puts them just outside of a neutral site quad 1 victory. So if we lose tonight, we pick up a quad 2 loss. A win tonight is a quad 1 victory, which doesn't really move the needle all that much, but an extra quad 2 loss probably knocks us down.
Oh, if we lose tonight, it's a quad 2?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they're not top 50 in net, so that's your answer. So that's kind of what's on the line. I think that's critical for the seeding. Now, I want to also talk about some of the other stuff around the seeding around the league. So we talked yesterday about what teams could get what seeds. Providence, I thought they were locked into a 4, but I looked at KenPom this morning. They dropped like 12 spots in KenPom. They're number like 47 in KenPom. So, which is gross.
What about net? I don't know. Do you have the net in front of you, Chris?
I have the net in front of me. They are they dropped from 26 to 33 in the net in one night. So I have actually seen some folks move them straight up. They're 48 in KenPom. I just checked. Move them straight up and out of the 4 line and move them back into the 5 line.
Wow.
And so that's a blow to the Big East, because here's the other problem with going to the 5 line. 5-4, like, obviously now you're playing a 12 seed or whatever, but you're also not protected. So that means that the chances of them going to Buffalo or Pittsburgh are lower, because they're going to protect the 4 seed that they would theoretically play in the second round in that pod. So now all of a sudden Providence runs the risk of getting sent out somewhere that is totally foreign. Providence had one bad game. They're going to stay on the 4 line and stay protected, and they probably wind up in Buffalo. Then the other question, though, is where does UConn fall out? I think UConn's on the 5 line. That's kind of where I have them. They were there before, and I don't think they moved. Yesterday's games didn't hurt them. Obviously, yesterday's game doesn't help them either.
No, and Coach did say after the game he sees UConn being a team capable of making a real run in the Big Dance. And I agree with that. I know we talked about that a little bit last night in preparation for the game. I think last night's basketball game was just an awesome game. that I found myself sort of feeling like towards the end of like, I really don't want to lose this game because I loved this game and I thought it was such an awesome game. Like I don't want to have a sour taste in my mouth about it. And I agree. I think UConn is a dangerous tournament team, much more so than Providence right now, where they really limped to the finish right after they were talking about like we really won the Big East and everybody else was like, okay, prove it, and they couldn't beat Villanova. They get the absolute doors blown off of them by Creighton after not rescheduling that second Creighton game in the regular season and saying they would have won it anyway. There's a lot of question marks there with Providence, and I think there's a lot less question marks with UConn.
Well, it's interesting, right? This is almost the exact same situation that happened in 2018 when Xavier won the Big East regular season championship, because Xavier wins the Big East regular season championship, but gets swept by Villanova, then gets beat by an upstart lower seed who wins their way into the Big East championship game on semifinal Friday in Providence that year. And then Providence went and took us to overtime. So Providence is almost now the Xavier in the situation. When Xavier did that, no one said, Xavier, it's Xavier's conference now. Nope. So if we go out and win the championship tonight, the asterisk story is very much for the continuation of taking, and everyone will look upon that Big East regular season championship with a questioning mind going forward.
And I'm not saying this to dance on them so much as I am to just marvel at the roller coaster that is college basketball this time of year. 2 or 3 weeks ago, you had Providence Twitter demanding that they be considered as a 2 seed and talking about what it would take to be a 1 seed. And think about how far that conversation has just fallen from grace. And again, I'm not saying that to like dance on their grave, because I think like all of us, we're, after tonight, we are rooting for the Big East, obviously, unless they come up head to head against Villanova in a later round. We're rooting for them. But the conversation has changed dramatically in just a matter of weeks.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Okay. So that kind of concludes the bracket talk. The one final point that I'll make, I don't think it warrants too much discussion, is Xavier is sweating bullets right now. They are like literally, they might be the last team in or the first team out. So they are literally sweating bullets as we speak. But the interesting thing to note here is that the NCAA committee still has their COVID rule, whereby if any team has to go out due to a COVID situation, a replacement team is called into their place.
Interesting.
And so theoretically, like the 4 1 seeds, if you will, in the NIT are kind of like on call to step up and into the NCAA tournament. And if Xavier doesn't get into the tournament, they're going to be in that pool of teams. So maybe Xavier gets the call. Maybe Xavier winds up in the tournament after not getting selected on Selection Sunday. That would be something.
That would be absolutely wild.
That would be very strange.
But
it didn't happen last year, so I wouldn't buy into that happening, but that'd be crazy.
If you're Xavier and you finished your season the way that you did over this last month of just absolute horror, and you go to they're liable to get upset in the very beginning of the NIT, right? Like they're just, the heart is just can't be in it the same way.
No.
I would agree.
No one's excited to play in the NIT. Not nobody. Some teams are excited to play in the NIT if they are like trending towards like relevance, and so
they're in a heavy rebuild, aka Georgetown in a couple years.
If DePaul makes the NIT next year, they're going to be excited to be in the NIT.
Yeah,
straight up.
I think DePaul could run through the NIT this year.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to make it there, so I think it's moot, but I think they could.
No, you can see 2 Big East teams in the NIT. Xavier, if depending on what happens, and St. John's, of course. So, all right. I just want to talk one more point before we wrap up here. And I just got to say, guys, it's time to really appreciate what this program is. Like, we are the litmus program for everybody. Yeah. Like, you talk to UConn fans I have plenty of UConn fans who interact with me on Twitter, but you even see the conversation just on Twitter and online and whatever, and amongst UConn fans in general. And the conversation is all about like, man, we're so close to being on Villanova's level, but man, they're so good. They're so well coached. They do everything right. They make so few mistakes. Like they play mistake-free basketball. They hit all their free throws. How could you not like enjoy like how this team plays basketball, even if it makes you furious that they do it so well? And like when you hear sometimes the best medicine is to hear how another fan base talks about your team, especially if it's good. And like hearing that conversation, and even like Rob, we were sitting in the stands and we had some UConn fans, we had some Providence fans around us. And like, as they were leaving, they were like, man, you guys are just so good. Like every time UConn threw a punch, you guys had an answer. Every time you got sent to the free throw line, you made your buckets. Every time the situation called for the right play, you guys made it. And it's like, man, it's just like a special thing. And I think like we need to take a moment to kind of marvel at what this program is. And I like to do that now, right before we get into the NCAA tournament, because the NCAA tournament is so feast or famine that you need to take that moment to really appreciate what you have. And this program is just like when we went to Villanova 15 years ago, Chris and Rob, and you watched that Allen Ray, Randy Foy team, I remember thinking to myself, man, that was awesome. But college basketball can be so fleeting that like, who knows what this is going to be. And to be here 16 years later and to be a perennial powerhouse that those guys built and were part of the building blocks, like unbelievable to see what this program has become.
Absolutely. It's funny. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, go ahead, Rob. Take it away.
No, I was going to say, I remember a few years ago, I think it was when Eric and Phil were leaving, we had a segment, we were talking about kind of what it meant for the program. And we were saying that there was a lot that was unwritten. And it's funny to look back on that a few years now with the benefit of hindsight. And we've clearly come from just one golden age almost into another golden age and another level of kind of stability and program elevation. So yeah, you absolutely have to appreciate it. The run that we've had over the past decade is something that lots of teams just absolutely envy. So take it in every game.
I think when we all were in school in 2000, but an underdog, and we've basically become the Yankees, the late 90s, early 2000s Yankees in the Big East. I will say, to Chris's point, I have noticed there is a healthy amount of respect from the other Big East schools. So when you get into the dog days of the fighting, it sometimes can get a little disrespectful. But for the most part, you can really appreciate the respect that we get from the other fan bases as being at the top of the mountaintop. And you just have to kind of soak it in. And then, Rob, you use the term, so I'm going to latch onto it. I really think we are living in the golden age of Villanova basketball. Some people argue maybe it's a shade behind us because of the championships in 16 and 18. But Jay Wright, if you put his career on an arch with other great college basketball coaches, you still have another decade plus of Jay Wright to be taking shots at the big dance in the title in the big dance. You have to like where that's going to lead. I think we are smack in the middle of the golden age of Villanova basketball, and couldn't agree more with you guys that it's really important to step back on nights like tonight and really appreciate that as we head into the peak of the season.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. So with that being said, 6:30 p.m., Madison Square Garden, Fox, not Fox Sports 1. Almost said Fox Sports 1. On Fox, we get to watch another Big East tournament championship game with our Villanova Wildcats being the upper seed versus the Creighton Blue Jays, coached by Greg McDermott, a rematch of the 2017 tournament championship game. And we have the opportunity to watch that. And then we have the opportunity to watch the best day that we don't play basketball on, which of course is Selection Sunday tomorrow at 6 p.m. So I'll just make a plug now. Rob and I will be getting together for a podcast immediately following Selection Sunday, and we will have that out to you as soon as we possibly can with a full breakdown of tonight's game, a full breakdown of the selection show and our seating and our path and everything else. quick look around the Big East to see how the other Big East teams shook out. So you can expect all of that from us by late tomorrow. We'll try and drop that as soon as possible so you can listen to it so you know exactly what not to do in your bracket picks, because Rob and I get this wrong every single year. And I'll pass it to Chris Ncaa with Nova Tip Time to give us a little bit of a hint as to what he's thinking of doing for Villanova's big March Madness run.
Yeah, for all of our sakes, I hope we get a favorably timed game on Thursday or Friday, because my full intent is to do a Villanova Tip Time pregame show like normal, 15 minutes before the scheduled start of the game. We might have a wrench thrown into that plan if we get like a really weird time, like a noon game or something. But I think even in that scenario, I likely will still do that. So follow the Twitter account. I'll have up to the minute updates. As soon as we get the timing tomorrow night, I will come out with a schedule very shortly thereafter. But you should expect to see Villanova Tip Time ahead of all of our NCAA tournament games, and hopefully there are several. Want to just say thanks again, Chris and Rob, for doing this with me this weekend. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love getting to work with you guys on all things Villanova. Really want to thank the Villanova Alumni Association, the Villanova Alumni Club of New York City, who helped us a ton with setting up this event and promoting this event. Even though we had a couple curveballs thrown our way, I think everybody involved was super nimble. They got a space in the team hotel. So really just happy that we were able to kind of pull the rabbit out of the hat here on this weekend, despite having some technical difficulties. And just, again, want to thank you guys for having me along for the ride.
Yeah, thank you. And I echo your thanks and appreciation for all the groups that helped us put this together on behalf of the Villanova community, really. So we really appreciate it. We have a big game tonight, Selection Sunday tomorrow. Get excited. Let's march Nova. All